What were these issues that were controversial that you were talking about?
Well, the course is the college's flagship debating course called Perspectives, and it is for boys in lower sixth, so about 16, 17-year-olds. And the theme for this term was identity. So the ideas that might be to do with sex, for example, or race or class, all the kind of issues that come under the umbrella of identity politics, you could argue. And obviously these are all controversial topics in the media and culture at large, so it's important for boys to be engaging with them. And over the last few years, what I'd noticed is that some of these were being treated in a way that, in my opinion, was partisan, and schools have a duty to be non-partisan in the presentation of political topics.
Can I just stop you there? Well, what do you mean by partisan?
So one-sided. So taking one particular line and not exposing students to consider the strongest arguments from the opposing side. As an example of that, one of the students was complaining that he felt that gender theory was being presented as fact in PSHE lessons. And I had found that in trying to encourage wider debate around that, resources which were described as excellent were being blocked in case it caused upset. Now, it's difficult to see why a resource which, on the one hand, the person blocking says is excellent, shouldn't be allowed to go ahead for the purpose of stimulating student discussion, just because it might cause upset to somebody. Freedom of speech involves the freedom to upset and also the freedom to receive information that might upset. So it goes to the heart of what education is all about, really.
So you created this lesson, right? You then went to teach these lessons, and then what happened?
Well, it's important to give a bit of background about what creating the lesson involved.
No.
So I asked a few people senior to me, would this be a good idea for a topic to talk about the concept of toxic masculinity and patriarchy in a way that isn't often touched on? And they said, that would be interesting, good to stimulate debate. So then I did some reading, made sure everything in the lecture was referenced fully because I wanted to keep it to a high standard, which is what the Eton boys expect, and honouring the academic prestige and scholarship of the institution. So there are over 40 academic references in the lecture, places like Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Yale. So I wanted to give the boys a fairly heavyweight reading list to go and pursue in their own time. The expectation was that they would disagree with the lecture. On Perspectives, every single lecture is scrutinised, and boys are encouraged to do that. So the idea isn't that you just listen and sit there and say, what lovely points, I agree completely. The teachers ask the students to pick it apart. So this would be a good opportunity for them, I felt, to be able to try out some of the ideas they'd been hearing about patriarchy as, in its entirety, a social construct involving the oppression of women by men. But after I produced the video, the request came through to upload it onto the college's internal intranet system, which is what is normally done when you distribute resources. So I agreed to do that. It was sent around to the teachers on the Perspectives course. And before it was ever shown to students, the complaint came in saying that according to the complainant, merely to allow students to critically discuss this amongst themselves would place that member of staff in a hostile environment. Now, to me, that was something very different from saying, for example, that particular teacher didn't want to have a discussion with me or a debate with me on stage about it. I had asked for that. Would anybody like to present alongside with me or give a live counterbalance as I'm making points? Nobody wanted to do that. That was disappointing, but what was more disappointing was that the boys themselves weren't allowed to think for themselves about the material.
And what was it that you were presenting as this challenging course? I understand you weren't saying this is the truth. They're supposed to push back against it and work out what they think for themselves. Yeah. But what was were you saying, you know what, patriarchy is great and we need to bring back more of it? Is that what it was?
Well, actually, it was a presentation of the standard view from evolutionary anthropology, which is that patriarchy is at least partly rooted in biology. That's why we see it in other mammalian species, not just human beings. So it's difficult to see how it's purely a social construct unless we've also somehow socially constructed it in other species as well, which seems doubtful to me. But this wasn't a particularly radical position. It's the canonical position in a whole body of mainstream science. It's just one that boys don't often hear because you get the view of the social scientists instead, which is purely social constructivism.
So you uploaded it,
Yep.
the complaint came through.
Yep.
What happened next?
So lecture gets cancelled, and I let the school know that it was already before the complaint had come in on my personal YouTube channel as well, with the agreed disclaimer. Now, why did I even have a YouTube channel? Why did I put that particular lecture online? Well, Eton is a charity, and it aims at providing educational public benefit. And one of the things I was doing with the YouTube channel was just uploading some videos on the set poems and text for GCSE boards to help students in other countries who might not have access to, in some cases, high quality teaching or had missed lessons through illness, things like that. It's good to have extra resources to help people out. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback from kids in Malaysia, Africa, all over the world saying, thanks, you helped boost my grade for my literature exam. So that meant a lot to me. I'd also noticed through running a school for state school students during my summer holiday at Eton to help give them a push, normally for Oxbridge application. A lot of students were coming in with this, in my opinion, quite myopic view about the application of patriarchy theory to some classic texts, to the extent that even if they hadn't read some particular works, they almost already knew what it was about because everything is just about patriarchy. It's all just men oppressing women. Now, there's some truth to that, but it's also the case that you should think about things on purpose in a way to challenge your ideas. So I thought it would be good to get people trying to undermine their own viewpoints if that's what they're so entrenched in. So a video to shake them out of it.
Okay.
Some people watching this might be thinking, well, what Will was actually doing is he was trying to sneak his particular opinion about this under the guise of creating debate. Is there some truth to that? Are you quite strongly against the idea of the patriarchy being, about oppressing women and women have been historically oppressed and all of that? Or do you have a personal view on it?
Well, the video overlaps with my own views. And if you look at the conclusion to the video, the main points, which is that men have traditionally been valued for procreating and then providing for women and children and protecting them, I think those are all fairly solid basic family values. There's also the message that masculinity, because of those three traditional values, is essentially the antithesis of paedophilia. I don't think that's particularly controversial either. And there is overlap. I would say the video is slightly more hardline Darwinian than my own view of culture and society. But Darwinism is something the boys cover in science lessons. Why not see it brought to life with a couple of examples from history and video clips and quotations from poems and books?
Were you not worried, Will, because you'd already had one complaint against it? You weren't allowed to teach this course. Were you not slightly worried about uploading it to a YouTube channel to the public, which could be construed, let's be fair, as a two fingers up to your employers?
Well, it was already on YouTube before I even received the complaint. And once I heard that the lecture was cancelled at Eton, I thought, I'd better leave this thing up unless I'm given a really good reason to take it down, because there's going to be an investigation into this and I'd like people to see what I'm being investigated for. And I'm thankful I did leave it up, because if you heard that someone had been sacked for a video and then you're wondering what might have been in that, could lead to some questions. But most people can go away and watch it and think, all right, there are some punchy points, but nothing that extremely intelligent sixth formers wouldn't be expected to engage with sensibly.
So you did it, and then what happened?
Well, in the end, after saying, if you tell me what's wrong with the video, I'm happy to edit out particular bits. I think it should go ahead. I think it honours our tradition of debate. And getting no response about any particular bits that were problematic. It was just the entire thing had to come down. I was given the ultimatum of take it down and then you'll be investigated without being suspended. Or if you leave it up, you'll be suspended and investigated. So I felt that given that the investigation was happening, I was going to leave it up because I didn't feel there's anything wrong with the video. and then suspended from the college while the investigation was ongoing. And then after a long process of appeal, during which there was a large open letter set up by the students, signed by nearly 3,000 people, saying that we feel this debate should have gone ahead, I was dismissed.
What I find strange is that if the ideas you were presenting were controversial, but they're part of this debating thing that you do at the school, I find it very odd that they just wouldn't find someone who would present a counter-narrative. Do you have any sense of why the school felt? Did you have like other complaints about you in the past where people, you know, upset with you over something else?
No, so this is one of the things that I find chilling about it, is that my disciplinary record up until now has been perfect, and it's held in quite high regard as a teacher by parents and students and by colleagues as well. So something about this particular video really hit a nerve. And my thought is that perhaps it is a traditional defense of masculinity at an all-boys school. And I think all-boys environment increasingly nowadays is quite sensitive and nervous about that, almost embarrassed to be an all-boys institution. But there's a funny irony about that, because why are you one then? If everybody working there wants to push this viewpoint that there's something terrible about masculinity, why are you running an institution which discriminates against girls at the point of entry?